Melissa Ansell-Bridges is Secretary of the CTU, and she joins me this morning to talk about employment law issues in our Toil and Trouble slot. Hi Melissa, how are you going?
Hi, fine, thank you.
Now, let's start with the Screen Industry Workers Bill, which is expected to undergo its second reading today. Can you just give us a brief outline of what this is and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually going back a little way now. The Screen Industry Workers Bill has been a victim of COVID, and so there's been quite a delay. So this goes back to a working group which was established under Ian Lees-Galloway when he was Minister, right back at the start of Labour's government when they first came in. And the working group was brought together to come up with recommendations for what employment relations should look like in the screen industry, basically. So it was a response to the colloquially known Hobbit Law, which many people will remember from a while back. And so what the Hobbit Law did was it basically established that everybody in the screen industry would be engaged as a contractor. It removed the ability for them to be able to challenge their contractor status, which meant that they weren't able to access collective bargaining, they weren't able to access the minimum terms and conditions which you were able to as an employee. And so the working group was set up to come up with a better alternative to that. And the recommendations which came from that working group enabled those workers in the screen industry to set minimum terms and conditions for different occupations in the screen industry. And that was important because the working conditions of a director are very important to a gaffer or to an actor, for example. So it needs to be something which is able to be tailored for those different occupations. So there's a framework for that bargaining to happen. Those minimum terms and conditions would then apply to everyone in that occupation in the screen industry. And so that then sort of sets a floor above which people can still have individual contracts. They're actually required to have individual contracts. So it's not establishing rates for everyone, but it will establish minimums and also for employment conditions also. And then the other thing that the legislation will do is it will create the possibility of collective bargaining on an enterprise-by-enterprise basis. So that might be with a production company or on a specific production as well. That collective bargaining will actually be able to take place, which it can't currently because of the Hobbit Law and because contractors aren't able to collectively bargain. It's viewed as price fixing or sort of cartel behaviour.
Do we know for sure that these changes won't put people off filming in New Zealand? I mean, that would be the criticism, I'm sure, from some of the film industry. What do you say to that?
I would say that the changes in this legislation are actually very light touch in comparison to what exists internationally and in the places where most screen production happens. So looking to the UK or looking to America, where you have really strong unions in the screen industry, and you have sort of much more robust collective bargaining processes and a culture of that as well. So actually most studios who would be looking to come to New Zealand are very used to operating in a very unionised environment. And this is providing a framework which will actually mean consistency and predictability for those production companies in a way which will actually benefit producers as well, because there will be a predictability, but the scheme actually still allows for flexibility as well. So I'm not concerned that that's a risk. It is very light touch in comparison to what exists elsewhere.
And when do you think it's likely to come into law?
Expecting it to be later on this year. So second reading, hopefully today. It obviously still needs a third reading, and then there is a period for it to be brought in, but hopefully by the end of the year.
Right. Now, contractors are also the basis of the second issue we're going to be talking about, contractor reform. So that's contractors more broadly. Can you tell us about where this is at, please?
Yeah, sure. So there was an extensive consultation process which was conducted. It was also a victim of COVID, and so submissions for that came in sort of early 2019, and the policy development and sort of further processes as a result of that work have been delayed for a while. But towards the end of last year, there was a tripartite working group established. So that was CTU and Business New Zealand and government, and that was to look at what had come through that consultation process and to consider what changes need to be made in this space. So as it exists, as it stands currently, contractors in New Zealand, there's a lot of people who are engaged as contractors who are in quite vulnerable positions or who are engaged as contractors and actually really shouldn't be. And that's either because it's sort of by accident that the person engaging them doesn't know that they should be engaged as an employee rather than a contractor, or it's being actually done deliberately by engaging parties who are wanting to avoid having to engage people as employees, because that means collective bargaining and it means public holidays and sick leave provisions and KiwiSaver and so on. So the purpose of this working group was to come up with a bunch of recommendations that would create protections for those contractors who are basically excluded from the kinds of protections and benefits that we would expect them to have.
Does it make a difference that Business New Zealand sort of left the tripartite working group or didn't support the recommendations?
Their name is on the recommendations. Their logo's down the front of that page. So
okay.
we're hoping. I mean, there is more policy work to be done. This was in a sort of an initial offering, I suppose, and there is a lot of detail to work through. But there is a very clear need for this work that will improve, the working lives of a lot of New Zealanders, and so we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue that work in a way with Business New Zealand, with government, which aims to support and protect those vulnerable workers and create better employment outcomes for all workers in New Zealand.
And Melissa, just finally, if I am a career driver, when can I expect to receive that protection? I mean, this has been going on for a while. Is there a kind of a year we're headed towards that might see a change?
Well, we're very hopeful that we might see something next year. Obviously, there's more policy work that will need to be done once we have a response from the government. But there is an urgency around this work because, as you say, this is an issue that's been long-standing, and I think we have a better idea of it more recently in the last couple of years about the injustice, the unfairness of the situations that a lot of these workers find themselves in. So very hopeful that we'll see some change soon.
Melissa, thank you very much for talking to the NBR.